railway, which is a great example of things we need to be doing around decarbonisation, but it ran over because about 30 volunteers turned up at the end. I had to speak to them all, but I'm here now, and that's the important thing. So thanks everybody for coming. It's great. This is my first CERA event I've done, and it's great to see so many people here. I'm the parliamentary representative for CERA. I'm on the executive committee. Probably more importantly for this, as it's COP26 Question Time, I am the Inter-Parliamentary Union Rapporteur on COP, which means that I represent all the global parliaments alongside an Italian parliamentarian at the summit in Glasgow to represent the views of parliaments. We're currently drafting an outcomes document really to challenge the government negotiators. And that's what we're doing. I'm also the chair of the APPG on net zero, and with Karen here, I could not say that. Karen is our brilliant secretariat, part of our brilliant secretariat at Sustainability Hub. So I need to do a little bit of housekeeping, unless somebody did that before I arrived. I'm looking around to see Melanie. Probably not. No housekeeping, so I will do a little housekeeping. Okay, so and it's probably too late for half of this anyway. We are seeking to minimise the risk of the spread of COVID. We're recommending people in the audience wear masks during the event, and the chair should remind people to start, which I just have done. And apparently disposable masks are available at the venue for attendees who don't have one. When we come to the Q&A, there are CERA staff and volunteers on hand with roving mics, so if you just wait momentarily for the mic at that point. We are live streamed. I think we're on now. Yes, the thumbs are up. And we have a number of hashtags, which are CERA Lab 21 and then the general hashtag of Lab 21. I think that is all of my housekeeping related items. So without any further ado, I'll introduce our brilliant panel of speakers, and they'll all have 5 minutes each just to make some opening remarks about COP. I'm absolutely delighted to have fellow CERA Member of Parliament and the chair of the BEIS Select Committee, Darren Jones, we're the only two northwest in the country who've got Labour MPs. Bristol Northwest, and I'm Leeds Northwest, so we're Northwest buddies. First up, and then we've got Sarah Boyack, who I've only ever met virtually up to this point, who is an MSP in the Scottish Parliament and spokesman on external affairs, but I think Sarah's really well known for years of campaigning work around environment and climate change issues. And then we've got Bridget Jones, who's the deputy leader of Birmingham Council, which is the largest council in Europe, just slightly bigger than Leeds, which is my council. And they've recently introduced a clean air zone, which we are a bit jealous of, I have to say, in Leeds, because ours got scrapped by the government, but they would just move on quickly. And they're doing lots of other great work, like developing a tram scheme, again, something which we're jealous of. And then last but not least, we've got Karen Potter, who has worked on climate environment change issues for at least 20 years, I think, originally from the United States. And runs the Sustainability Hub, and as I said, is the secretariat for the all-party group on net zero, and is doing lots of brilliant work getting parliamentarians, private sector, NGOs together and active at COP in Glasgow. So over to you, Dan.
Well, thank you, Alex. I'm going to stand up, which I hope doesn't ruin the live stream because I'm too tall. Fine, great. So as Alex said, I chair the BEIS Select Committee Business, Energy and Industrial Strategy in the House of Commons, and my job is to hold the BEIS department to account on behalf of the whole of Parliament. But in addition to that, we're the lead scrutiny committee for COP26. And so we've established a cross-committee grand committee on COP26 with Foreign Affairs, Environmental Audit Committee, Transport, and others who have a shared interest. And we tend to lead the scrutiny for COP questions on the floor of the House of Commons. And so I've been asked to talk a little bit about what do we want to see from COP, what does success look like, and am I optimistic? So let me start. What do I think success looks like at COP? We have to keep 1.5 degrees C target alive. As it stands at the moment, with the nationally determined contributions that have been lodged at the UN, we're on trajectory for about, I think it's 3.2 degrees. That is a catastrophe. You will know that. That's why you're here at this meeting. This is why it's great that CERA does the work that it does, and all of my colleagues on the panel here. But we are far off where we need to be. And a really key point there is the big emitters in the G7. There is a G7 meeting before the COP26 meeting in Glasgow in November, and there are still enhanced NDCs, nationally determined contributions, that need to be formally lodged. And that G7 1.0 consequences in parts of the world, the impact on people's health, on business and the economy. And quite frankly, if we struggle to deal with supporting refugees coming from Afghanistan, imagine how the world's governments will operate in the face of huge climate refugee flows around the world. World leaders say they understand this. It was hugely successful to agree the targets at Paris, but COP26 is the time when you have to say how you're going to do it. The climate action plans that come alongside those nationally determined contributions are going to be super important, and it's the first time that we'll see in proper detail how countries will do what they say they're going to do. Now, the COP conference will be going ahead. The physical negotiations will be physical for the national delegations, at least, with the British government shipping out COVID vaccines and providing space for quarantining. But the fringe will be very muted compared to before, often a bit like a bigger version of a party conference. Really importantly, civil society, NGOs, parliamentarians, faith leaders, and others would come together in the fringe alongside the official ministerial and official discussions in the official zone. That is going to be very muted this year because of COVID. And so that's therefore a big challenge for all of us as to how we keep on top of the negotiations and keep the pressure on our own ministers and officials here in the UK, but through our presidency for countries around the world. Am I hopeful? For appropriate action in the next decade to keep 1.5 degrees C alive with the climate action plans and the international climate aid to deliver on them, then I'm afraid I'm not hopeful. And so as the UN has said, this is a red alert for humanity. As leaders have said around the world, this is our last best chance. I would go as far as saying this is our last chance to get it right. And I pray and hope that we do in November this year.
Thank you, Darren. Thank you, Darren. I mean, we're all talking very stark language now, aren't we? And that's the reality. So over now for a Scottish perspective on the talks in Glasgow.
Thanks very much. Well, it's great to be here to join everybody. And actually, that last comment about how optimistic are you, I think we've just got to do absolutely everything we can with political pressure in the UK Parliament, all of us pressuring our MPs and working with community groups to make sure that we can make this successful. I've been asked to focus where Scotland is on climate goals, how do we differ from England, and what does Labour want to see in Scotland, and then come to that, how successful is COP26 going to be? Our targets are radical, and we are really proud of our targets. We want to reach net zero by 2045, just 5 years ahead of the rest of the UK. That target was reached with lots of negotiation, and we only actually agreed that target on the last day when we were passing the Act in Parliament, and it got cross-party support, partly because we got excellent lobbying from outside the Parliament, from the Environmental Coalition in Scotland, but also because Labour was signed up to it. And we were saying to the Scottish Government, the SNP, if you don't sign up to this, you're going to be found wanting on climate change. So we got that deal, and we'd done the same in 2009, the first Climate Act. Again, it was radical because of our amendments, and we pushed the SNP on it. But for me, it's not just the 2045, because that is a long time away. It's the targets of 90% by 2040 and 75% by 2030, which is less than a decade away. So what we're trying to do is to push our government in Scotland to take the action now, because it's an emergency. It's a climate and biodiversity emergency. And we've got our historic responsibility. The Industrial Revolution that started in Scotland, that created jobs and got us going, we've got to repay the developing countries, the global south, because we got ahead because of our exploitation of our resources. So it's got to be a fair share for those countries. In our Act, we included sustainable development goals and climate justice, because it's not just a headline target, it's joining up every act of government to make sure you're delivering. So for us in Scotland, we want to see a just transition. And the big issue for us is new jobs that are going to be net zero jobs, and they're going to cut right across our economy. So, for example, we are a world leader in renewables. I think we've got something like 40% of the potential of Europe's renewables, but we import most of our renewables kit from Indonesia and China. And we've got companies in Scotland with the skills, the knowledge and the experience that could build those renewables, and we're not using them. In fact, one of them is on off all the time, BiFab and Fife, and Machrihanish just went down again for the second time in the west of Scotland. So these jobs are crucial, and we're pushing our government very hard to take the political leadership and action to deliver. We've got a Just Transition Commission. It's not enshrined in law, but the SNP government have agreed to start it up again. And that is crucial because it involves the trade unions in Scotland and it involves the NGOs. So it's not just civil service led, it's actually involving our communities and the people for whom we have to have a just transition. If you asked me my top priorities at the moment, buildings and homes, retrofitting thousands of homes, creating jobs across Scotland, addressing the fuel poverty that is going to rocket with the energy crisis we're currently in the middle of. It's got to be about more on renewables, community-owned renewables, council-owned renewables, co-op renewables. We know it works. Other European countries have been doing it for decades, and we need to do it as well because it's about investing in our communities. We need a transport and a green industrial strategy to underpin our economy. So it's about action now. For me, we're successful in renewables, but let's make it successful so that everybody gets access to those jobs right across our communities. Is COP26 going to be a success? Well, as Darren said, it's got to be. We're in the climate emergency now. We've known for 20 years that it's coming, and we've not done enough. We've now got coastal communities that are vulnerable in the UK. We've had floods in the city centre of Edinburgh that people were shocked because climate change is somewhere else. You know, it's Bangladesh, it's the global south, but it's not. It's them and it's us. And we've got to act now. We've got a responsibility. I hope that you're going to get a genuine welcome in Scotland, physically and online, because don't underestimate the impact of networking with all those leaders from the global. For us in Scotland, we've got a particular chapter. We've been coalition. Now, you might think that would help matters, but it's been incredibly disappointing in the last couple of weeks. They've abandoned plans for a national energy company, something we've campaigned for and was an SNP commit. That's gone. They've been equivocal about the development. We think it should go ahead. We need a just transition for our oil and gas workers to use the skills and knowledge and technology in that sector. And we urgently need a transport sector. Nothing to rebuild the bus services we've lost over the last 14 years. And, you know, symbolically agreeing to cut 300 rail services a day when you need to give people choices so they don't have to be in their cars. Not off to a good start. So Scottish Labour is going to use the energy from our conference here. We'll use the networking we're going to do. And it's great to be here so that we can network, so that we can campaign with third sector organisations or trade unions and take the political leadership at every level in the UK. The Scottish and the Welsh governments, to work together with our local council colleagues and to work with our UK colleagues, because we can't miss this opportunity. We've got to deliver on COP26 and it's up to all of us. Thanks.
Thank you, Sarah. I'm delighted we've got Bridget next. I used to be the lead for climate change sustainability on Leeds City Council. So the work the local authorities are doing throughout the UK is absolutely vital and real work on the ground to decarbonise. So over to you, Bridget.
Thank you. So I've been asked to talk about the role of local authorities in delivering net zero. So first of all, let's bust the myth that Labour are out of power and are in opposition. We are running 77 councils in the UK, covering 23% of council areas. We are in power in Britain in local authorities. These aren't insubstantial places. If you take mine, Birmingham, as an example, we have a population of 1.1 million. That's bigger than 3 EU nation states have. We have an economy bigger than many countries in the world have. What happens in local authority areas matters for what happens on a national and on a global stage. So to take mine as an example, we're a global city, we are a hugely diverse city, which is our great strength, but we're also 7th most deprived in Britain. We are very vulnerable to an unjust transition if it's done in the wrong way. But we've got all the potential there. We were at the heart of the Industrial Revolution as a city, and we've got all the potential to be part of the green industrial revolution that we need to see. So, as being the biggest local authority in Europe, we're also the UK's largest local authority housing provider and builder in the country. We need to build thousands of new homes in our city and retrofit thousands of others to make them greener. We're the 20th largest landowner in Britain at Birmingham City Council. We steward the land from parks to open spaces to industrial sites to roads. We design the roads and the open spaces that you either choose and feel comfortable to run and cycle and be active down, or to choose to sit in your car and avoid pumping out emissions. What we do on a hyper-local level matters towards this agenda. Next year, we're hosting the Commonwealth Games. My little countdown on my phone tells me it's terrifying 304 days to go. We're committed to making that the first carbon neutral games ever, which isn't an easy feat for something that is essentially flying people in every corner of the world. But we're committed to doing that and on track to do that. But despite all of our ambition and all the potential there, at the moment, local authorities don't have all of the powers and the budgets that we need to drive the changes that we have to see if we're going to get our emissions down. Our budgets have been cut over the last few years. Since 2010, Birmingham City Council alone has lost more than £750 million from our budget due to government cuts, lost nearly half our staff. Our planning powers have been weakened, and all of that is hindering the path to zero carbon. Things like the Green Homes Grant have vanished. To make public transport more attractive, we have to go begging to the government for the powers to integrate even things like ticketing and to regulate buses. The settlement right now is not working and needs reform. But despite those challenges, what are we doing? There is still much we can do. So as a council, we declared a climate emergency back in June 2019. We've set ourselves a very ambitious target of 2030 to be net carbon neutral as a city, to be net zero carbon, which is a massive challenge. We've made addressing the climate emergency one of our 6 key priorities as a council, and is now weaved through everything that we do. We're starting to test our policies against that commitment. We created the Route to Zero Task Force in 2019, bringing together the NHS, city organisations, most importantly, community groups and some of our youth climate strikers as well. And we launched an ambitious action plan last December. It's 100 pages long, so I won't walk you through it right now. But it includes building more than 7,000 homes by 2031, built to high environmental standards, converting our district heating systems to a carbon neutral fuel source, getting 9,000 electric charging points around the city, and working up an urban forest plan and biodiversity strategy as well. It's a myth that Birmingham is a concrete city. We're already at 23% canopy cover. We're very green, but we want to go further. And we launched our first hydrogen bus in July. We've got 20 more on the way. As has been said, we launched the Clean Air Zone, the first city outside of London to charge polluting private vehicles to come into our city centre a few months ago. It was in the face of fierce political opposition and often downright wrong statements that were being made about the impact that would have. But it is starting to show results. So we think that we might just be within legal limits now for emissions in the city centre for the first time since we started counting a very, very long time ago. Though bold moves like that are starting to pay off. So I'm really proud of what we're doing. I've used mine as an example. There are loads of local authorities doing amazing things up and down the country. But we could do more if we had a proper devolution settlement in this country. Alongside the list of all the great things we're going to do, we've got a wish list of things that we really want to do as a local authority, but we currently don't have the money or the power to do it. It's our wish list to government of what we would do if we could. and we are lobbying them, and we are looking for funding pots and to be able to deliver those things. So just finally, what do we want to see from COP26? Well, we're working with our local university of Birmingham on a series of events around that. We're hosting a community assembly on Route to Zero. We're looking to hold a regional green zone as part of the COP26 Cities and Region Day to showcase what we're doing, hopefully spark more activity. But most of all, what I want to see is our government recognising that they cannot deliver what we need to deliver nationally without properly empowering councils to go out there and do the things on the ground that make a difference. Whatever our government signs up to and promises at COP26, which I hope will be the ambitious targets that we absolutely need for all the reasons that we talked about, they've got to work out how they're going to devolve powers and money to local authorities to deliver the change, because otherwise it'll be words and we're not going to be able to get there. Thank you.
Thanks, Bridget. Great. Finally, before we come to you.
All right. Welcome, everybody. Appreciate seeing everybody here today. And I think that if I'm talking about consent for action, and see that this is happening. Via Greta's lead on the climate strikes, which we actually saw over hundreds of thousands of people around the globe last week, reinvigorating their own claim and call for action. They concluded that public concern about the environment has actually reached a historically high level. And with the latest IPCC reports, and we're all seeing this, the floods, the fire, the droughts in the news, this is not a jump of concern. This has been building and steadily rising from about 2015, where the public is demonstrating that they're worried about climate change and they want to see action. So the question is we're actually living right now in an age and a time when we see consent and a clamoring for action. When the citizens' assemblies reported from across the UK, they called for thoughtful leadership and a clear direction. And they were not self-interested, as many people accuse that these committees might be. They wanted fairness and social justice, freedom and choice, and protections for the natural environment. So one of the final things they called for was an education program, and this is an area we see a glaring problem. There's a huge disconnect between the policies, the targets that Sarah's talked about earlier, and the actual ability to deliver by inspiring people to realize what we need to do in our own lives. To mark the anniversary of the Climate Assembly, Sir David Attenborough, who is the actual citizen, people's advocate for COP26, said that the citizens' assemblies have done a truly remarkable job of highlighting the high level of interest across the country. And not only that, they developed a roadmap for MPs and government, which would show the way to how we're going to achieve net zero. And if you look around in the UK and globally, citizens are clamoring for action in a way that political parties and governments are not prepared to meet. So there's a divide between what we're ready to do and what policy is being delivered and acted on. So the voice of the COP is the UK government, of course. It's not the Tory party, but it is the UK government collectively. And this is really important to remember that we are one of the leaders on climate policy. And the reason is our Climate Change Act, which was an absolute show of bipartisan, cross-party support across all of the aisles and demonstrated. And I think we had that same support. And Alex was a real advocate for the net zero policy and reaching that goal of 2050. And that sees the need and the drive for us to work across all political parties. Now, this COP is particularly about action and not words. This is something that we have really banked a lot of time and effort trying to do. Our government currently is very heavy on targets and promises, but we're a bit light on the delivery. And we have an inconsistency in our policy delivery. So we have expansion of airports, billions and billions pledged on road building, inconsistent messaging around trade deals that we're now in the process of developing. And these defy our own commitment to climate change. It's important for us to amplify the voices who are going to take action and call out all of these promises that are ending up not delivering. And of course, we know we can all violently agree that why don't we have energy efficiency program. Why? I worked for the Energy Saving Trust 20 years ago, and that was the low-hanging fruit. And the Climate Change Committee and the IPCC will tell you that there are steps we have to take in order to get where we need to get, and this is the easy stuff. We've already worked on our energy supply in our system. We've decarbonized energy supply, and now we need to make the same moves. This is the easy stuff, doing our houses, doing our transport systems, and then it starts to get very difficult. Labor must be the voice at COP to reinforce these messages, and I think that that's something that there's a real opportunity. Labor has a history, and of course, we've seen Ed Miliband taking quite a prominent voice recently, and I think that his experience, Alex and Darren and others, will be those voices that will ensure that the policies are not just targets, and we need to commit and deliver on these policies. We're represented in civil society through our citizens' assemblies, and Darren obviously is one of the key advocates for doing this. They urged, when they were presented with the problem and told the depths of what our challenges are, they urged clear government leadership. They wanted to see the same things that businesses want to see. They want to see consensus. They want long-term planning and phased transition. They called up for a joined-up approach across society, so each of us would know our roles and know what we need to do to act on that. Now, I think one of the big elephants in the room, which is interesting at this COP, is a discussion of money. And for the first time ever in a COP, an entire day is dedicated to finance. And I think that's a very important shift. We need to move from the rhetoric and the words of Paris to actual actions in COP here in Glasgow. Hundreds of billions in annual investments are going to be required to decarbonize the economy. And these are not insignificant numbers, but if you actually step back and look at the capital global markets and the amount of access to funds that are there, trillions of dollars annually coursing through these investment systems, it's not a big investment, 1% of GDP to get us where we need to go. The Labour Party and civil society must highlight these points at COPs, and we must prioritize diverting from fossil fuels and stopping the investment. And we know, as we sit here and speak right now, there are strategies for exploring and exploiting gas and oil, and people are investing heavily in this. And if we cannot agree and meet the Paris commitments, we are never going to get where we need to do that. So one of the big commitments we need to deal with is taking the funds out of fossil fuels. Just say the IMF, I think they estimated $6 trillion were invested in fossil fuels across the globe last year. So there's much work to be done. Many of these governments that are doing this are the LDCs, and they need to be investing their money in COVID recovery, education, and pulling their citizens out of poverty. This week in the UK, we are issuing green bonds. However, one of our most ethical banks is refusing to buy UK green bonds because this is a situation where you have the sector telling government this isn't good enough and these bonds are not clean enough for us. And this COP provides the opportunity to ensure that we can do something about this and decarbonize in a good pace and address those projects we need to do around refurbishment and around our power systems and our infrastructure for EVs. This is going to be a tough task for COP. And if for any of you who've been involved with this process, you will see, and as I said, the green zone is going to be a very, very diminished space this year. So the question is, how do we keep this dialogue going and engage with people? And I know the IPCC and the Climate Change Committee both have made important statements. There is hope, and maybe the Prime Minister would like to think that Kermit is on our side. And we know that if we can support the UNFCCC and fulfill the commitments for Paris, we can be on the road to achieving the things we need to do in Glasgow.
Thank you, Karen. Over to you now. So we have to finish at 1:30 because we have to clear the room and restructure it for another event at 2, another CERA event at 2. So I'll take questions in rounds, but it'd be good to get an indication of how many people would like to ask a question. So I'll get a feel for how many. We have to have 2 rounds, but how many people we've got, and I'll work out how many rounds we'll do. Slightly more on this side than on this side. So what I'll do is I'll take all the questions on this side and a couple on that side. So in the front row.
Hello, I'm Adam. to something where there aren't specific milestones or measures?
A little bit further back. You're doing a very good job passing it to each other. Hopefully you'll sanitize your hands afterwards. Yeah.
Hi, thanks. My name's Jo Blackman. I'm Labour councillor and also work for an organisation called Global Witness. I had a question for the panel about post-COP. I'm really quite concerned that we've seen some good rhetoric come out of government ahead of COP, but when the pressure's off, you know, what's going to happen then, particularly as potentially we see some actors on the right really start to turn against some action on climate change, obviously in the context of increasing gas prices as well and pressure there.
I'll take two more. Is there anybody else on that side? There's one more over here on that side, and then I'll take there, that one, and then we'll break, and then I'll take another round. I'll obviously get a chance to take another round.
A couple of months ago, I read a book, and towards the end of it, the author states that the deep sea is an incredibly slow-moving ecosystem, and it takes a long time to regenerate. One of the great threats to it at the moment is deep sea mining, in part fueled by the need to find the materials to power our renewable technologies. So I wondered if you had any ideas on how we could find the materials required to produce renewable technologies without further declines in biodiversity.
Great. One of the great challenges, renewables and mineral resources. So we're one more here, and we're going to break. We've got another mic. Yeah, there we go. Great. We've got a mic on each side. That's brilliant. Then we'll break for answers, and then we'll come back for another round of questions.
Hi, my name is Jacob Hayes. I'm from Manchester Airports Group. We've experiencing a really difficult 18 in technology and development of things that we need to actually reach that goal.
Okay, so just a couple of interrelated questions there. So I've got Cumbria and Cambo, rhetoric not delivery, how are Labour going to hold government to account, post-COP, what happens next, deep sea mining and the need for raw materials for renewables and technology development. I think you can answer all of those for me, Darren, but maybe you can choose what you would like.
Sure. I'll try to answer them in two parts, which I hope I do fairly without avoiding any question. So I think the first question, the first answer that rings true to a number of those questions is the net zero test, whether it's about policy or how we produce technologies, where the supply chain comes from, and how we fund things. You know, we need a whole of government net zero test. You can't have a BEIS Secretary of State that says, of course, we're committed to this, and we're really uncomfortable about, you know, digging up coal we don't really need. And then a planning department that says, oh, well, you know, it's for the local council to decide, and we're not really going to say anything. You can't have a prime minister that says he's committed to tackling the climate crisis, and then extension of fossil fuel drilling rights for an oil company going through. And, you know, you mentioned those two. Actually, there's a whole list of other problems, you know, from aid and so on and so forth, where the gap between rhetoric and reality is enormous. And so you have to have that whole economy, whole of government net zero test to align to our net zero target in 2050. That then poses the next question, which is, okay, if you've got that, how do you actually hold people to account for that? Now, I chair a select committee. Parliament has established processes for scrutinising ministers and holding them to account. We will do work in the post-COP environment. Alex is on the Environmental Audit Committee, not anymore, sadly. But the Environmental Audit Committee will be doing some important work, a bit like the Public Accounts Committee in post-COP monitoring of our own climate commitments, and the BEIS Committee will be doing the same. But you're right, and I worry a little about the amount of exposure the newspapers are giving to a small number of Tory MPs on the right who don't know what they're talking about. They don't deny climate change anymore, which is progress. But actually, they're still on the front page of newspapers, kind of saying things where they don't have any evidence based to that. And we have a job to do in Parliament, and Alex and I work together through APPGs and others to make sure that we're putting people with credible voices in front of journalists and other people so that we can keep the public with us, keeping that high level of support for the net zero transition, but especially as we start to get to some of the difficult decisions which will come into each and every person's home across the country. The last thing I would just say on the Labour side, and this goes to your point on future sustainable aviation fuels and lots of other industrial policies, is Rachel Reeves just gave an excellent speech on the conference floor where she not only announced that Labour would reintroduce an industrial strategy. The Tories have scrapped it with net zero at its heart, but she's also committed to £28 billion of capital investment each year over the next 10 years. That is real money, significant amounts of capital investment there that would unlock a lot of these innovation opportunities, scale them up and actually get them working in the UK, not just for our domestic consumption, but for our export opportunities as well.
Yes, I think Jet Zero is accurately called. It's not really delivering anything. Bridget, what about post-COP in terms of local authorities? You're going to be at the front line of delivery. So what do you think post-COP?
Yeah, so two things probably. The first is it's leading by example and showing what we are doing in local authorities and challenging, I suppose, the government to match that and match that scale of ambition that so many of our Labour councils have shown up and down the country. The thing is, we're presenting the government with solutions. Our wish list of things we'd like to do to get to net zero it's there for the government to take off the shelf and to go, okay, here is some stuff we can actually invest in. Here are some powers we can actually free up to achieve all of those things that we promised up in Glasgow. I feel like we're making it easy for them almost to do that. So in terms of holding them to account and pushing for those things, we've almost got our lobbying playbook ready to go. We know what we want from them. We know what we think needs to be devolved, and we're going to keep banging the drum for that because we can show that that's going to make a difference.
Thanks. Sarah, I don't actually know what this coalition localisation on Cambo is, but I'm sure I could probably guess, but I'm sure you'll be able to inform us.
Oh, it's on the record because we've actually had a couple of debates about it in Parliament in the last couple of weeks, and our net zero spokesperson, Monica Lennon, was really strong on it, and that's why I said it's actually been a bit of a disappointment because the SNP had alluded to the fact that we're thinking about not Campbell, but have just backed away from that, even with a Green coalition. So I think for us, it's got to be about giving confidence to invest in green renewable technology, but also to work with the existing oil and gas networks to think about what the transition is for the staff that work there and how you use the skills. And that's just got to be fundamental to this. And the other bit is just the massive opportunities we've got in Scotland in terms of offshore renewables, tidal wave. You know, there's a lot of construction jobs in there. There's technologies have been invented, and we need to have the pipelines so that companies have actually got the confidence to actually put the investment in. And the Crown Estate is allocating contracts as we speak. So this is actual jobs. It's not theoretical. I think the challenge for us in Scotland is we need some of those jobs to be in Scotland. So when we've got new planning applications for renewables, it's not that we demand every single job to be built in Scotland, but we start setting targets and we work with industry to put the pressure on. And the government is just not doing the political focus on this. It's partly because they're thinking about independence. So any chance to fall out with the UK government, and you know, you're talking Boris Johnson, he does make it easy for them. But what we are trying to do is to say practical on the ground investment, work with the big energy companies, look at where the opportunities are. And the other points that were made at the start, I think by Karen, about existing homes. I mean, just don't underestimate the number of jobs in local communities that are relatively straightforward in terms of apprenticeships and pipelines for local companies to have jobs to sort out fuel poverty. I mean, this is not a no-brainer. It ticks every box going at the moment. And it's not just post-COP, it's also post-COVID. If you think about a lot of our businesses, the massive pressures that our businesses are under, having the green industrial revolution is about new jobs and it's about supporting existing jobs. It links it in our further education sector, and it's opportunities for young people leaving school now. So this is all about the government being committed on all of these issues, having a joined up approach and seeing this as an opportunity to seize. There are going to be challenges, but if you don't at least do the low-hanging fruit now, that's just completely unacceptable. So I think our job as an opposition in Scotland, but also, as Bridget said, we're empowering a lot of local councils. It is hard, but there's things that they can do now with the right government support. So for me, the UK government, we've got to hold them to account, but government at every level in our country could and should be doing more to give the confidence to business to invest, but also to use public policy to get the maximum from businesses so that you change business as usual to net zero as usual. And that's what we've got to do to go forward.
Thanks, Sarah. And also not to forget Metro Mayors, all but two of the Metro Mayors are Labour Metro Mayors, covering a huge area of England. we're going to, in the Labour Party and in Parliament, we're going to need the support of civil society actors, Karen, in terms of holding the government to account. How do you think we could work with them, work with you?
Well, there's certainly so much scope. We've all, I think, highlighted that the government is ambitious in their goals, but the delivery is quite thin on the ground. And there are a number of actors who are involved in this, and it's businesses, it's citizens, it's local delivery, and it's the press as well. So there's an opportunity here for us to help businesses to have the confidence and faith that there's going to be a policy direction, that we cannot, and we need to remind governments, this is not going to be something where the market forces make everything fall into place. This just will not happen. So we need to be there to set the policy, to bring businesses along. Many businesses don't want to invest in the UK right now. They are afraid of the market in the UK. And we need to convince their boards that this is a good and safe place and that we're committed to net zero. And obviously the targets of 2050, the ICE engine targets, the various targets help us get there. But there's an opportunity for the Labour Party to engage more with businesses and to win over that public support, which is happening now, to harness that involvement, that consent to deliver, and to work with the various players who can do this. And there is that final role with the press. And it's depressing when you think about there are certain titles that continue to, I think, permeate these myths, these untruths, these flat out lies about what's happening. And I think we need to challenge that. And I think Labour Party is very well positioned to do that and has the authority to do that. And they have the opportunity to lead in all of these areas. And I think that they really need to take advantage of that.
Thank you, Karen. Right, I'm going to take 5 more, and then we'll also include the closing remarks in those 5. And look at that side of the room. I'm now going to do this side of the room. So I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. Sorry for the others. Yeah.
Association of Accounting Technicians. Just following up on the point about rhetoric matching reality, but also I feel the government really have been given a pass on lots of this stuff. If passenger duty, for example, recently there was a consultation about scrapping or reducing it for short-haul flights, which would be hugely damaging. But the government message, of course, was focused on, but it will be increased for long-haul flights. Increase in VAT on renewables, whilst there's a reduction for coal. None of this stuff adds up. There's loads of it. Plastic packaging tax, repeatedly referred to as world-leading and ambitious. Whenever you hear a minister talk about it, that's the phrase they use. It is so far from world-leading. It is beyond belief. This stuff. What more can you do to challenge that, both in Parliament but also in the media, as has been highlighted already?
Hi, my name's Liam from Leighton and Wanstead CLP. I guess the question I had is about how do we ensure that developed countries support developing countries in a sustainable way that doesn't overburden them with debt when they're investing in climate change projects?
Thank you. Hi, my name is Nina Dale Parker from Hampstead and Kilburn CLP. I'm also a law student. So this question is kind of directed at you, Darren. I think you were also a law student one day, back in the day. I wanted to kind of put forward the idea of ecocide, meaning the crime of the climate damage to our planet as a recognized crime in international law, and whether you could maybe bring that to COP26 if any of you are going. An amazing woman called Jojo Mehta, she runs Stop Ecocide, an organization, which I think David Lammy is also involved in. But I think we can use the law as a very positive tool for change, especially in terms of accountability. Because that's the question that was asked previously. Because I think it can be used against, obviously, corporations that want to start new oil plantations or oil fields. So yeah, that was my point about using the law for positive change.
Hi there, my name is Nicola. I'm from Care International UK. This is a similar question to the one at the front. We know that women and girls are disproportionately impacted by climate change and are at the forefront of leading the response. Do you have any plans to make sure that women and girls' voices are prioritised at COP26?
Thank you very much. Paul Mountain from Worcester CLP and Worcester and Shropshire Quakers. Darren just referred to the Shadow Chancellor's commitment to £28 billion per annum for the next 10 years on the industrial low carbon transition. Quite a few of us in the conference hall thought she said 28 million, and we were therefore shaking our heads in despair. Could you please confirm that? Just for the, have you seen the press release?
I'm going to bring Darren, because he's got to go, and also directly just answer that very easy one there.
Yeah. So I've not seen the press release, but it must be billion. I mean, it can't be million. I mean, if it is million, then I'm in trouble now, but I'm pretty sure it's million. How do we hold the government to account better? My select committee's got an inquiry at the moment on net zero delivery and governance. The trouble at the moment is select committees, which play a really important role here, will only do this work if they're interested in it. And not all of the committees are really that interested in it. And there's an interesting debate about whether actually, in addition to committees like mine, maybe there's some new governance we need to do in order to give more of a profile. I would also like ministers to have to come and give an update on the carbon budget each year, like they do with the actual fiscal budget, and make it a big kind of annual event on the floor of the House of Commons. But we've got to persuade the government on that. On international law, I would like that. You'll know it's quite difficult to do and quite difficult to enforce international law. I think as a first step, maybe let's try to do it in the UK and persuade our friends of the European Union to do it, and then let's see if we can go global. And I think those are all the questions I have to dash.
Thank you.
So sorry.
No, that's great. That's great. So maybe actually, Karen, sort of taking on from that, I'm sort of going to put you on the spot here because as the chair of the Net Zero Committee, I'm quite interested in that in the eco side. So maybe we should meet with Nina and Jojo about that. So I mean, some of those things, debt, ego side. And then also Voice of Women and Girls at COP in terms of the NGO and activist space, what will be done around that? Think about those ones. Yeah.
Well, I think one of the things that's really glaring, I'll just go back to what the net zero report that the all-party parliamentary group, we put together a series of 10 recommendations that came out in advance of the Prime Minister's own Green Industrial Revolution strategy. And one thing that was missing from what we included that was glaring was a communication strategy. There was no effort to engage with people. Women, girls, disadvantaged communities, there's no plan. And unless we can get the government to prioritize some kind of action on a plan, and certainly there's opportunities, again, from opposition parties to put the pressure on government to deliver. We have binding targets that force us to do the things we need to do to reduce our emissions and keep to a 1.5 degrees warming. So we have an opportunity, I think, if we hold the government in a way they've laid out their policies and they've failed to deliver. So even if we can go back to those policies and we can hold on, and obviously the government has had a difficult time to pass their own environment bill with an 82 majority. So there's an opportunity for us to engage cross-party with those backbenchers who are very dissatisfied, and we need to take action and we need to hold government on those points.
I mean, I don't know, Sarah, how close you are to the organisational aspects of COP, but maybe do you know anything about how the Voice of Women and Girls can be heard at COP?
I am not at all involved in the organisation of COP, but what we are trying to do is to have conversations that take place at COP so that you don't actually have to be in Glasgow to have meetings with civil society. We can do some stuff online, we can broadcast some stuff with delegates in Glasgow, and we've been pushing hard, and we've got it now, about vaccines to make sure that everybody can actually attend, because that was one of the worries I had, was that not all the delegates from developing countries in the global south would actually make it to Glasgow. So we've got to keep pressing to make sure that happens. I think in terms of winding up, I've mentioned vaccines there. We've been pushing for that because we're also in a COVID crisis, and that is hitting those countries worse because they don't have the money for vaccines. So that the death rates across the globe are something we should be talking about now and link it into people's recovery. Things that we've done in the past on issues like clean water and renewables, access to girls' education, which the last Labour government did. And I think, again, it comes back to practical things that our country's got a responsibility to do. So I think keep pressing for restoration of those international development cuts, Alex, because I think that's a fundamental issue. That's about global justice. It's not just about climate change, it's about a joined up approach. And I think for us as well, we are getting into discussions about having a circular economy bill in Scotland, because we export a lot of our waste to developing countries. And I've seen the waste piling up in Bangladesh which is creating health problems for that country. And that is not fair. It's not acceptable. So there's a lot more we need to do in our country. And some of it comes back to supporting our councillors, because we've seen our councils cut massively at a point where they need to be more innovative and tackling reuse, recycle. So all those things have got a global impact. And plastics, a massive issue in the oceans. So again, it comes back to us taking responsibility. And sometimes these things are hard. Negotiating with companies about a deposit return scheme, that is not an easy conversation to have, but you've got to get it on the agenda, because businesses need the heads up for us in Parliament to talk about what's coming next. What does that transition look like? How does the government support those businesses? And, you know, talking about air, we've got an air industry in Scotland that's just fallen last year. So you've got to carbon networks for air, but at the same time, you've also got to make it easy to go on trains within the UK. So it's getting a joined up approach to transport, having a long-term approach to jobs, and taking the political leadership, getting the local investment, and also making sure that those companies know what's happening and they can come with you and they can see what the investment opportunities are. And so that our pensions actually get spent to support low carbon initiatives, because there's so much more that we can do. And yeah, let's grab the energy from this event. And I don't know if any of you have ever been to Take One Action event, the film festival. That you need to personally do something. I leave you with that lovely challenge.
Thank you, Sarah. I think there are a couple of things there, probably from a local authority perspective, we're thinking about maybe some tax changes. So, Richard, over to you.
Thank you. Just on the women and girls point, as Sarah pointed out to me on the way in, just how unusual and refreshing it was to be on a panel that was majority female. Not very often that happens. I mean, the funding model for local government is fundamentally broken, and reforming some of the tax things in this country is a great opportunity to fix some of that, the right resources where they need to be. On the challenging the government on their nonsensical and hypocritical priorities, I'd add to that things around planning law, where we've got ambitions to do various things, but no powers to turn down planning applications that are fundamentally terrible for the environment on a lot of levels, and ditto transport powers. All these ambitions around integrated transport systems, around making public transport the default that people should want to use. And we're in a fragmented, privatised system with very little coordination outside of London. There's just two examples of nonsensical power location, really, I'd cite. But finally, I'll just leave you with the thought where I started, really. The Labour Party is in power in 77 councils up and down the country. This isn't theoretical for us, what we're going to do about climate change. It's real, and Labour is doing it. We're showcasing it up and down Britain. So let's take the stuff that councils are doing, and let's showcase that, and let's build on what we do when we are back in government in Westminster.
Yeah. I'm going to have to be really rude and ask you, now that we've finished, first of all, thank the panellists. That was a really great session. Sarah have got a great programme over the rest of the week, but we need to clear the room because we're having a round table in half an hour. So thanks, everybody. Please clear the room quickly. Nice to meet you. Yeah, Lisa. Oh, Jay. That's